Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Double E's Talk Tech. My name is Mike Hoffman.
And I'm Daniel Bogdanoff, and we are back with Jit Lim. Jit, thanks for coming back this is our third episode being recorded. This may actually be the second one that airs. I don't know, we'll see. But in the first episode, Mike asked a question, and I said, let's make that its own podcast. So do you remember what that question was?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So we were talking a little bit about the different USB alt nodes and how it can provide a data connection for things like Displayport, Thunderbolt, HDMI, the list goes on. And it's called a universal serial bus. So it's kind of nice. It's a universal umbrella
USB.
to kind of transfer all this data. But why are we even using all of these different legacy serial buses like HDMI? If we have USB 3, why aren't computers and monitors communicating via USB to transfer video information? Things like that. I think that was kind of the crux of the question.
Yeah.
Will there be a universal serial bus, just one basically standard that transfers just anything?
Yeah. So with USB Type-C, we more or less now have one connector that can rule them all, right? So a bunch of different protocols run over that same connector, but it's still a bunch of different protocols and a bunch of different standards and specs. So the question, if I recall, was kind of like, why don't we just have one spec to rule them all, to go with that physical connection? So we hoped you could enlighten us.
Am I wrong, by the way? Like if I use HDMI alt mode, is it layered within USB 3.1, or is USB out of the question and it's just using the physical layer of the cable? Maybe that's
let me answer
question.
that second question. So the answer is when you go to alt mode, it's a whole different protocol. It's got nothing to do with USB.
Okay, got
all
it.
the questions or comments are very relevant. So in answer to your first point, today, Type-C is a connector that combines these different technologies. So prior to this point, if you had, say, Thunderbolt 1 or 2, you had a special mini DP Thunderbolt connector. There was a special HDMI connector. There's a DP connector. But there is one connector that combines them. So today, USB runs on Type-C, and you can run alternate modes. So for example, today you can run say Thunderbolt or Displayport or HDMI over the same Type-C connector.
Right.
Same physical connector, but to your point, they're not the same. So once it switches from USB, say, to Thunderbolt or Displayport alternate mode, it's a whole different protocol, different encoding, different packets, different speeds. Everything is completely different. Hence, there are many folks saying, wait a minute here, when we use Type-C, why do we have to use N for a key site? Why do we have to test so many different standards? Is there a way we could have one technology? We have one connector now. Can we have one standard, one interface instead of a whole bunch of different, modes? And the answer is people are looking into that. So you could see how many people are discussing the notion of a Type-C I/O that, shall we say, unifies all these different standards into one. There's no question that work is absolutely happening.
And that would have to encompass like bulk data transfer and display technologies and all of that. But at the end of the day, that's all just data transfer, right? So why aren't we there yet? Like, why don't we already have one?
Publicly today, Thunderbolt actually has some of these facets. Today, Thunderbolt technology, and this is public information, already they use the word tunnel. So Thunderbolt today tunnels DisplayPort and PCI over the Thunderbolt protocol, if you will.
Okay.
So there are technologies that do that.
That one's layered in. It's like a Thunderbolt packet inside of, or a DisplayPort packet inside of a Thunderbolt packet.
That would be the best way to describe the Thunderbolt technology. It's got, like for example, PCI or DP tunnel or carried within the Thunderbolt protocol. And to your point today, you can see that happening. So Thunderbolt today will run, data, for example. Thunderbolt today actually has a native display mode, which is within the Thunderbolt protocol too. So some of that's already happening with some of these technologies. So definitely great question. Definitely lots of thought and work going towards this unified Type-C I/O, if you will.
Interesting.
Okay. So Thunderbolt has a native video display capability, but I didn't know that, I guess. But maybe that is because I haven't bought enough products that have adopted that standard for transferring video. I'm assuming maybe something like an Apple TV might use that.
Yeah, so publicly, if you go
so-
search, you can actually buy Thunderbolt displays
Okay.
Really?
that actually will run Thunderbolt. So it's
out there, but maybe
it's
not
out
widely
there
adopted
already.
yet.
The notion that there is a technology that can run display or data over the same technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine in the past, this is all speculation, but with something like, HDMI 1.0, they're trying to design this as cheaply as possible. So they're not going to build in the bandwidth to do like a bulk data transfer. But to go with a protocol that's already built for data transfer and to try to adapt that into something that works for displays would make a lot of sense, in my mind at least, because you already have the throughput, you already have the bandwidth. And really for a display or a camera, like you're only sending data one direction. So you have overhead as far, I guess for any data transfer, you're sending data one direction. But you have overhead for something like a display that doesn't refresh very fast. Refresh is fine for us. But.
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm not even aware what the data transfer speeds are for a lot of the popular video formats, but they can't be nearly as fast as USB 3.1 or 3.2, especially, right?
Correct. So there's a notion of a muxing or using multiple lanes. So like I mentioned before, the Type-C connector is 24 pins, and generally you say that 4 differential pairs can be used to aggregate data. So in DP mode, you can actually get 8. So I think it's 8.1 gig times 4.
Dang.
But again, the PHY rate is the most important. So I mentioned that DP is 8.1 gig, USB is running at 10 gig, and Thunderbolt is running at 20 gig. So
okay.
when you multiply those bit rates with multiply by 2 or 4, depending on which direction you're going, you can get some pretty big numbers on that pipe, if you will.
Do you think a physical form factor like Type-C, like the current Type-C form factor, is viable for a technology like this, or would we have to rev to a new physical layout?
That's a great question. So it's very reasonable to question if a connector can send these rates through. But the fact is, for the past 2 or 3 years, many vendors, including the Keysight issue laptops, we have been shipping Thunderbolt 3 enabled ports. So the fact is, out in the market today, lots and lots of products already run 20 gig by 4, or it's an 80 gig Type-C port. And I say 80 gig because there's crosstalk, right? There are 2 20 gigs going in one direction, TX, and 2 20 gig going in the other direction, RX. So the fact is, these products are shipping. And I think I mentioned the last conversation, which my less than $1,000 Type-C Thunderbolt product will run at 20 gig by 4 today or 2 years ago. Yeah. It is kind of crazy. It's an 80 gig port.
Huh. And I guess we're already running up, you can run up to 100 watts of power, with an asterisk through USB Type-C. So
yeah, so
data, if you're running,
that point is really related to the Type-C PD power delivery spec. Mm-hmm. And the spec allows Type-C implementations to run up to 20 volts, 5 amps, which is 100 watts. But generally, most, say, laptop products, maybe around to 60 or 70 watts. That application, I think, we see more in like a fast charging, rapid charging application. So pumping lots of, amps through a charger. So instead of charging your phone in, 30 minutes, you plug it in, and in 5 minutes, you got 80%. So that's where some of the charging applications come. And
I will say, I'm really disappointed every time I charge my phone without using a fast charger now. When we did the very first podcast 2 years ago, that was like new and exciting. But now, without fast charging, I just get sad. I have to admit. Like I plug it in, it says like 5 hours to charge, and it's why? Why? Yeah, I don't even sleep 5 hours a night. I have kids. I'm up in the middle of the night. I need my phone.
So a USB 3.2 and USB 3 in general has these alt modes, and the USB protocol itself is for data transfer. Are there any USB modes for anything other than data transfer? Like, are they going to start? Is there going to be like a USB native video mode like there is for Thunderbolt at some point, or what are they? What are they thinking there?
There's certainly discussions around that topic, and I think publicly available there are various USB audio and video modes. For example, most of us, when we do a conference call today, all we do is, if you think about it, we just use a USB port on our headset. So if you think about it, that technology is already being done today, which is we use a USB headset to do our conference calls. We don't no longer use that jack. So right there and then, it's evidence that we have USB audio implemented. But for sure, there are discussions around how we can take USB to different areas. Because to your point, they're all data.
Right.
So
Yeah. So I'm assuming like a USB headset is just digitizing my voice, putting that data into a standard USB data packet, sending it to the PC, and the codec on the other side, drivers unpacking it, stitching the data back together. So I guess that maybe maybe this is a question that's a little bit bigger than the conversation we're having, but you always see these. You got HDMI, Displayport, Thunderbolt, all these different video standards, all these different data standards. And I'm assuming the only reasons new ones come out is because someone's developed something that's faster. Is that kind of a good assumption? So at what point, I guess, do people just say, well, we don't need HDMI anymore. We can just use USB?
Yeah, so there are two parts, right? One is the consumer model. I keep using my mom in Malaysia example, right? If I try to get into details like DP or HDMI, she would confuse. All she sees is a Type-C looking thing, and she's going to plug it in and have it work. So the vision for Type-C would be plug it in and it just works. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect that we need to be aware of is the ecosystems. So if you look at the way the standards groups are structured today, they are quite separate. So today, the Thunderbolt group has its own environment or ecosystem, if you will. The USB has the USB IF, which is its own ecosystem of developers. Displayport is under VESA, for example. HDMI is in separate groups. So there are different players in each of these groups that, shall we say, are comfortable developing and continuing to develop in their own environment.
Right.
So there is a push. My mom would like everything to just work. She doesn't care what it's called, but there are different consortiums or groups that run each of these that are completely different. In other words, say the VESA team or the HDMI team or the Thunderbolt team, may or may not, shall I say, agree with some of the other standards. And now your question is, well, why not? Well, one of the things is for test and measurement is the cable loss. So, for example, USB might say, hey, you know what? In our use case, we only be able to use long cables.
Yeah.
Right. And so now you got a performance model that you have to keep. The Displayport or Thunderbolt may say, look, we want to use only short cables. It seems like a simple thing from a usage perspective, but the requirements on the silicon design and the testing is significantly different between a technology that uses a long cable and one that uses a short cable. Those are completely different things. So this is an example of how it can be very complicated to have a Type-C I/O where everybody's happy because the requirement on the implementation of silicon it's very different depending on the channel model.
So
very different.
If a technology like this were to exist or to be developed and considered, would it take all of these different special interest groups and consortiums working together, or would it be someone like USB IF just saying this is what we're going to do and it's going to do everything, so we're going to make these other things irrelevant?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think there are three parts to this, right? So this consortium groups definitely have a say. They can encourage other groups to say, hey, let's get together and do a Type-C I/O. Let's just, make it easier for the consumer. So they can do that. Certainly the other standards group need to, shall we say, agree that we want to kind of move to the direction. But ultimately, one of the key things is that the customer, right? What would the customer want to do? I think the answer is, again, I use my mom. She's like, I just want to hook this up with this hole. She sees a hole only. She plugs it in, she plugs it in. So from her use case, she doesn't care if it's a keyboard or a mouse or a monitor or storage or display. She's going to plug it in. She's going to expect the thing to work.
Right.
Whatever the thing, if that's a Type-C hole in her mind, like, and it goes into that hole, this thing's better work. And so that's the user experience.
That's how I feel too.
You know, that...
Imagine a world like, remember computers back, even now, you look at the back of a benchtop computer and a big brick, and it's got VGA, it's got audio jack, it's got a microphone jack, it's got PCI Express slots, it's every
DVI,
3 USB
HDMI.
ports. Imagine looking on the back of a computer and it's just like a brick of like 20 USB ports, and that's it. Power, microphone, keyboard, doesn't matter where you put them. Everything uses the exact same cable. Your mom would love that. I think everyone would love that.
And you wouldn't have, like, I have a drawer full. Don't tell anyone in this building. I have a drawer full of like miscellaneous cables.
Oh, everyone's got their cable of shame drawer. Don't worry.
I know, but
I got a box.
yeah,
it's a shoebox for me.
It's like, man, I wish I didn't have to hoard cables to get my monitors to work. You know.
The fact is, we're actually close to the vision, right? Because today we do have this one Type-C connector. So from a perspective, we're getting, I would say, half or more than 50% of the battle is won, because at least we have one common connector. Now, the challenge is there are some variables. For example, today, you do need to have to be knowledgeable about the technologies, because the cables today are a little bit different. So, for example, my mom I could buy her a Thunderbolt computer and a Thunderbolt display or drive. I'm sorry, let's say a Thunderbolt drive, for example. She might buy you can buy a Type-C USB 2 only cable. She's going to hook it up, and it's going to work, but it's going to run at USB 2 rates, 480 megabits, when she could be running on an 80 gig pipe. So the experience is good, but it could be better. So there's still some shall we say, improvements to this ecosystem. But we're almost there, because my mom has a great experience. If I get her a Thunderbolt cable, it's going to run faster. But she's still going to have things that work to a large extent. But gear shift in this case to USB 2, because that is a valid Type-C cable.
Yeah.
So
interesting.
It'd be a nice world, just a computer of all USB Type-C connectors. But I do have to say something before people in the comments start going buck wild. How about all USB cables and a 3.5 millimeter jack? I know everyone needs a headphone jack. We need our headphone jack. Okay, we'll keep that forever.
Yeah, I do like the headphone jack. I'll admit. Okay,
I get crap for that a lot.
Liking the headphone jack?
I have an iPhone 8 and it doesn't have a headphone jack. I haven't used wired headphones in like 5 years, so I don't care. Everything's Bluetooth.
Yeah.
My buddy goes, crap, your audio quality. Wow. I'm like, okay, well.
It depends on the headphones you're using.
Yeah.
Like, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fair.
The audio file, I don't. That's a deep, descent into madness. So.
Bonus episode of another time.
Yeah. Like, how many harmonics can you squeeze into a Type-C 80 gig? Anyway, I think we're running up on time, actually.
Well, the one thing I'd like to add is, at the end of the day, Keysight is into test and measurement. So you can imagine that on a Type-C port, if the customer had implemented, say, USB 3.2, Thunderbolt, Displayport, well, each of these has to be tested per the standard, and they're non-trivial. So from a test and measurement perspective, it will help us and our customers if we had a Type-C I/O, because in that case, you should be able to test the PHY at 20 gig once. Or let me try a different number. Let's maybe at 10 gig once, as opposed to, let's say, 10 gig for USB, 10 gig for Thunderbolt, 8.1 gig for DisplayPort. So from a test and measurement perspective, it just behooves our customers also to be able to test at one rate as opposed to multiple rates numerous times for different
That's a
technologies.
huge perk for designers and engineers trying to integrate technologies into their boards and systems.
Exactly. So it's just a good thing for a test and measurement solutions and support also.
Makes a ton of sense. Awesome. Well, we end every episode with a stupid question. So, Mike, put you on the spot.
I don't think of any good ones.
Mike's looking at the roof. We had like dime size, maybe a couple nickel size hail as we were starting this podcast. So that was exciting.
What's your favorite song by Led Zeppelin?
And why?
And why?
Led Zeppelin. Was it Stairway to Heaven?
There you go. Okay.
It's a classic song. I think it's timeless. So it's just great music, great rhythm. So by far.
I like it.
Okay.
I like it.
If USB Type, I know you're a car guy. You're both car guys. If USB Type C were a car, what car would it be and why?
It's got to be a Lamborghini because that's just cool.
Okay. Fair enough.
I like it.
All right, that is all we have for today, Jit. Thank you so much for your time and for being on here and providing us what a glimpse into the possible future. So make sure to subscribe to Double E's Talk Tech in your favorite podcast engine. Check out the Keysight Podcast YouTube channel and the Keysight Labs YouTube channel because we have good stuff every week over there. Mike Hoffman, my co-host, thanks for being in town again this week. And I'm Daniel Bogdanoff, and we'll see you next time.